Good morning, everyone, to this stakeholder board and end user webinar. I would suggest we wait 1 or 2 more minutes because we still miss a couple of participants, and then I will hand over to Professor Ulrike Attenberger, who is the coordinator of the project, and she will then start with the meeting. So let's wait 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we will start. So on the screen, you can already see our meeting etiquette for this meeting. So please make sure that we see your full name and if possible also institution or affiliation in the list of attendees. So maybe you can update this. And we also ask all participants to mute themselves during the meeting so that we don't have any connection problems. If you have any questions, you might either type them in the chat window and we will address the questions. And we also have a dedicated question and answer session later in the meeting. And as we already informed you, this webinar will be recorded and we will publish it and also provide it to those who were not able to attend today's meeting. We hope that's fine for everyone. We also shared the agenda with you previously, so you also see the agenda on the screen now. And I will now hand over to Ulrike Attenberger from the University Hospital Bonn, and she is the project coordinator, and she will start with an introduction to the project.
Yeah, thank you very much for the brief introduction, Ulrike. Dear colleagues, I would like to welcome you to our first stakeholder board meeting, also on behalf of my colleagues, Wiebke Fenske and Georg Langf. And yeah, thank you for taking the time to spend this morning with us and your interest in iPod. As Ulrike from IBIA already mentioned, we will have a Q&A session at the end of our meeting, and we are very eager to get your input and your ideas and feedback. That said, I would like to start sharing my screen with you. So before we jumpstart with the scientific content of the project, I would like to take the chance to introduce us to you. It's only part of the entire consortium. I will also introduce the consortium to you, at least sidewise, but the three of us, we are the three partners of iPod that will sort of give you an introduction and lead you through this morning. I would like to introduce, first of all, my colleague Wiebke Fenske. She is professor and chair of diabetesology and endocrinology at the Ruhr University Bochum in Germany. She is, so to say, our clinical medical advisor with a strong background in endocrinology. Then the technical part is led by Professor Georg Langf. He is director of the Computational Imaging Lab at the Medical University of Vienna. He will give you feedback and insight on the technical aspects of iPod. And last but not least, my name is Ulrike Attenberger. I'm chair of radiology at the University Hospital Bonn, and I'm the coordinator of this project. We had an update on the agenda. First of all, I will start with, give you some background on iPod. What's the vision behind iPod? Then Wiebke will talk from the perspective of from internal medicine on the clinical need. Why do we need this project? And then Georg Langs will address the technical solutions we need to address the clinical needs. And then we have the Q&A session. And as I already said, we are really eager to get your input and feedback to our project. So, sorry, these are my disclosures. And so what's the overall motivation behind iPod? As we are aware of, obesity, unfortunately, is on the rise. Almost 60% of the entire European population have been diagnosed overweight or obese. And obesity causes more than 1.2 million deaths annually. And that corresponds to more than 13% of mortality in the WHO European region. I think these are really impressive numbers. From a radiology perspective, and also having Wiebke's input from the clinical side, the conventional imaging risk scores, such as the Egerton score, for example, and clinically used parameters, such as the BMI, are inadequate to really understand obesity, because obesity has a very complex nature, and not only obesity per se, but also the obesity-related risk factors for cardiovascular disease. From an imaging perspective, we are aware that the typical obesity-related plaque has sort of a different composition. And right now, imaging is not taking into account addressing this complex plaque morphology. And overall said, plaque progression is also independent in obese patients from conventional risk factors. So the main goal of iPod, and iPod stands for AI, artificial intelligence, for the prediction of obesity-related vascular disease, is to develop and validate AI tools to assess and predict the risk of cardiovascular diseases and its related complications in obese persons. So iPod will advance the current state-of-the-art by introducing a novel, groundbreaking cardiovascular risk prediction and management approach for the obese European population. And for the first time, all of these factors, such as clinical, lab, imaging factors, as well as lifestyle data, such as activity, heart rate, or patient's sort of diet, will be considered in this preventive, newly to be designed and built risk scores. So the consortium consists of partners from North, Middle, and Eastern Europe. We are 7 university partners. It's the University Hospital Bonn, Germany, as the coordinating site. It's the Medical University Vienna, Austria, from the radiology side as well as the technical side. It's Charles University in Czech, Heidelberg University, Leuven, and University Hospital Zurich, Switzerland. We have a very strong technology partner, the Imperial College of Science, Technology and Medicine of the UK. And we have partners from startups. It's the Medical Values GmbH, Collective Minds Radiology. They are based in Sweden. And our app development will be done by Brightfish from the Netherlands. And the colleagues from IBIA are taking on dissemination of this project and also are managing us. As you can imagine, it's complex to manage so many different partners from so many European countries. iPod divides into 2 medical work packages. It's the work packages number 2 and 6. We have 3 technical work packages. One is about building a data platform that's led by our partners Zemrad, because as you can imagine, all of these data needs to be shared in a meaningful manner so that the algorithm can be trained on. Work package number 3 is led by the Medical University Vienna by Georg Langs, and it's about developing the algorithm. And work package number 4 is led by our partners Bright Fish and Medical Values. And the objective of this work package is to develop clinical decision support and the iPod app. We have also taken into account the ethical and societal implications of implementing AI tools into the clinical environment. And work package number 5 is led by Pascal Bory from University in Leuven. And as I already mentioned, work package number 7, it's on dissemination, and this work package is led by our colleagues from IBER. So the primary objective of iPod is to improve the accuracy in predicting CVD progression using the iPod risk score compared to standard risk assessment in the obese European population. And the secondary study objective is to validate the Citizen app, which will support change in lifestyle and which will be part of the iPod risk score. And the tertiary objective is to validate the AI-based clinical decision support system to serve as a basis for further change in management, such as risk behavior or lifestyle intervention in the future. So that said, I would like to hand over to my colleague Wiebke Fenske, who will now give you more depth and detailed insights into the medical background, the medical motivation of iPod.
Thanks very much, Ulrike. I hope it's the right.
It's not the presenting mode. Now it is.
Now it is. Okay, great. Thanks very much, Ulrike. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it's my pleasure to start giving you a brief introduction about what is actually our clinical motivation for the iPod project, and especially why we feel that patients with obesity might particularly benefit from possibly novel AI-based tools for cardiovascular risk prediction. In fact, when we look at the major health problems of our time, there's certainly little doubt that diabetes has evolved to one of the leading global health issues in the last 4 decades. And it's certainly no coincidence that the obesity epidemic follows a very similar pattern, right? The World Health Organization, the WHO, is expecting a rise of 2.5 billion citizens worldwide being affected by overweight or obesity by 2045, so within the next 20 years. And notably, these calculations do even not yet consider the negative implications of the corona pandemic, and in particular the obesogenic consequences and implications of the lockdown measures, which we will face definitely within the upcoming years. So when we turn our focus more on the obesity prevalence, on the obesity rate in the European countries, we see the situation does not really differ, right? Obesity has developed to one of the major determinants of death and disability also in the European countries. The prevalence has nearly tripled within the last 40 years. Today, 60%, which is almost 2/3 of adults in the European countries, are living with overweight or obesity. Notably, already 8% of our young children at kindergarten age, so below 5 years, are living with overweight or obesity, and every third child at school-going age is affected by overweight or obesity. But the actually most alerting, the most warning message of the now latest obesity report is that today, for the time being, no single member state is in the position to reach the original target, which is to halt the further rise in obesity by 2025. So, and this development affects pretty much all of us, right? Obviously different levels, at individual level, first and foremost, at patient level, certainly, also at healthcare provider level, but also at health system and social community level. And of course, we all do know that patients with obesity are more likely to develop a number of potentially serious health problems, not restricted to, but including first and foremost coronary heart diseases, so heart attack, cerebrovascular disease, stroke events, also chronic heart failure disease, not only reduced ejection fraction, but more particular patients developing HFpEF disease. And importantly, we have learned in the recent past from large population studies that this association, this inherent risk, is true and is existing already years before diabetes or other metabolic and cardiometabolic abnormalities like hypertension, dyslipidemia, or insulin resistance have become apparent. And therefore, indicating that for many patients with overweight and obesity, the development of cardiovascular diseases is just a matter of time, right? Now, having said that, we got to learn a second important lesson just recently from, well, if you like, brand new clinical outcome data of the SELECT study, which is that intentional weight loss by the GLP-1 receptor agonist semaglutide may in fact essentially prevent the progression of cardiovascular disease in patients with overweight and obesity, and importantly, without established and manifest diabetes. So in the SELECT outcome study, a huge bulk, more than 17,000 adults were included aged about 45 years with already established cardiovascular disease. So that was a high risk population here with initial BMI of at least 27 kilogram per square. Patients were assigned 1-to-1 to placebo or semaglutide arm. And the primary endpoint, and that's all I want to show here, the primary endpoint was a classical 3 MACE endpoint, so a composite of cardiovascular death or non-fatal heart attack or non-fatal cerebrovascular event during a mean follow-up of 40 months. And outcome data show that treatment with semaglutide quite impressively reduced the MACE risk here by 20% compared with placebo over a mean follow-up period of 40 months. And these data are major advance for preventive cardiology, right? And why is that? Well, these data first time indicate that obesity, in fact, is not only an independent cardiovascular risk factor, but it turns out that it is a treatable cardiovascular risk factor by efficient weight loss medication. And that again brings us back to the initial and clinically relevant question, which is, so how can we identify the individual patient that is at high risk for cardiovascular disease progression and that might probably benefit most from intensive weight loss intervention? And how can we separate this one from another obese patients, maybe at similar BMI level or even equal BMI level, still being at comparably lower or moderate risk for cardiovascular disease and progression? And this is in fact a significant challenge in clinical routine, right? the prediction of the individual cardiovascular risk and progression in patients suffering from obesity. And that the more, as we are still struggling at the moment, Ulrike just mentioned it, with a clinically precise definition of what actually adiposity is. At latest, with the recognition of obesity as a quite heterogeneous condition, where individuals with similar or even equal BMI may provide quite distinct both metabolic and also cardiovascular risk profiles, it turns out that conventional risk scores, both imaging-based but also clinical risk scores like the ESC score, for example, and also clinical proxies for what we think obesity is, like the body mass index, become more and more inappropriate or simply not good enough to understand and to capture the complex nature of obesity and individual development of cardiovascular complications. Plus, even though lifestyle measures are constantly highly recommended by clinical practice guidelines, so for monitoring of lifestyle measures like diet regimens, energy consumption, sleeping habits, etc., is not integrated into currently available risk prediction scores. Well, and based on that background and against this, well, level of uncertainties, the main aim of the iPad project is to develop and validate novel AI-based tools to basically improve the assessment prediction of the individual cardiovascular disease risk and progression in patients living with obesity, and that essentially by integrating data recorded at one time point, including clinical, laboratory, imaging data, with real-time lifestyle data, which ideally should be acquired continually by a citizen app into a standard risk assessment, together forming a hopefully fully digitalized feedback loop reflecting individual risk profile to patient and physician, with the ultimate aim to come up to provide a novel, personalized, AI-based cardiovascular risk assessment and management approach, which enables patients living with obesity to more independently and importantly to more self-efficiently manage their own health and prevent the development of cardiovascular complications. So therefore, we designed a proof of concept study, a prospective, multi-center, open observational study accomplished at the moment at the 6 sites in Europe, which Ulrike just showed to you, to evaluate the performance of the iPod risk tools against current standard. In totaling, is supposed to include 1,200 patients with a BMI above or equal to 30 kilograms per square, aged about 45 years, with suspected cardiovascular disease. So we are focusing purposely here at intermediate risk population and scheduled for cardiac CT imaging. In addition to the imaging data, we will assess, will acquire a comprehensive full set of clinical baseline and also biochemical data, and patients then will be randomized one-to-one to a citizen app and fitness tracker equipped group versus standard care. And the objective of the study, this is my last slide for the moment, the primary objective is a higher accuracy in prediction of cardiovascular disease progression by using the iPod risk score compared to standard risk assessment. And secondary, we will assess the feasibility of continually collecting lifestyle data by the citizen app as an intentional feedback tool to users about real-time corresponding modifications in their individual risk profile. Secondly, we'd like to evaluate the possible improvement of iPod risk prediction in case that lifestyle variables will be collected by the Citizen app and implemented here as additional predictive variables. And last but not least, we will validate an AI-based clinical decision support system to serve as basis for modification of medical management by the treating physician. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention and possibly directly hand over to Georg Lanz. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wiebke. I would also like to suggest that now Professor Lanz presents the technical aspects, and then we will open up the floor for questions or feedback. Thank you. So Georg, please.
Great. Thanks a lot. I hope you can see my slides.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Yes, so I'm Georg Lanz. I'm from Medical University Vienna, and in the project, I'm part of the team that is developing the technical aspects of the project, and I'll touch a few points that Ulrike and Wiebke already mentioned, but basically unwrap a bit about our strategy to develop the technology and use the technology behind actually coming up with a AI-based risk score. Wiebke already showed that. I think the really exciting opportunity of this project is that we are able to collect really high tech, cutting edge technology clinical data in the imaging domain, but also in the laboratory domain and biomarker domain, and then combine that with a highly frequent obtained day-to-day lifestyle data, activity, dietary information, other information that we are collecting from the patients that are part of the study. And the basic idea or the overarching idea is how we can combine this information to give these patients, but also the treating physicians, a very accurate assessment of the risk of the individual patient, but also to lay the groundwork, basically to collect the evidence that's necessary to then in the next step also provide the patients with the day-to-day actionable information about what they could change in their lifestyle and what that would mean in terms of a change to the risk score. So let's dive a bit deeper into the technological parts of the project, how we are actually doing that. So the three main technical parts of the project are, on the one hand side, the iPod risk score. I go into a bit more detail later on. The clinical decision support system, that's the interface that is clinician facing, and the Citizen app, that's essentially the interface that is facing towards the user, towards the patient, towards every individual. Clinical decision support is meant for an assessment of the patient status, of the risk profile of a patient by a clinician based on the data that we know about the patient. The Citizen app is meant to inform the patient himself or herself, but also to collect data about dietary information, but also about activity, because the Citizen app is linked with a fitness tracker. The backbone of the project is the data platform that Ulrike also already mentioned, developed by CMRAD. Here in the project, first of all, this is essentially collecting all the data from the clinical systems and from the apps and the fitness tracker of the patients. Collecting that during the project, one big role of this platform is to then provide this data for research groups within the project consortium to allow us to develop the risk score and also to validate the risk score. The second big role of this data platform is to enable the prospective study that is running throughout the project in order to collect prospective data that we can use for developing the risk score. I think ambitious and interesting part, one of them is that we are integrating multimodal data. So we know that there is a lot of work on laboratory data and on imaging data, but I think we still have a way to go on integrating laboratory information, biomarker information, activity information, and imaging information into risk scores. And the platform is essentially the infrastructure that allows us to do that, both in terms of ECRFs. So for those of you who are familiar with clinical trials, ECRFs are a way of inputting information in a structured and harmonized way, but also directly linking to the clinical systems to essentially draw anonymized data that is linked to the individual patients that is necessary to provide training and validation data for our technical development. The overarching aim is also to have trustworthy AI. For us, that means, of course, that it's validated well. But I think one important thing that we are working on is making it transparent. So making the basis for the decisions and predictions that the AI-based risk score is providing to the patients and to the physicians transparent in terms of saying what's the certainty of these predictions, what are the source variables, and how a change in the source variables would affect the actual prediction result. And ethical and societal implications we have already mentioned, and I think Wiebke gave a great presentation that also touched this aspect. So let me get a few details, and then I'm really looking forward to the discussion. But let me give you a few details of the overall concept. So we have the data platform in the center of the infrastructure of the project. During the project, data from the individual clinical sites will go into this platform. That means, on the one hand side, a large retrospective data collection effort across all sites. Right now, we are at the phase where the pilot data of all these retrospectively collected data is in the platform. We are now performing one sweep of quality check and also assessment of the harmonization status of this data, of the status of which variables are available across all of the centers, which variables are available only in part of the centers, with the strategy that we would like to use both. So we will not only restrict the analysis to those variables which are available across all centers, but we also want to be able to deal with incomplete data, again, in order to solve our problem, but also methodologically. I think for all of the clinical research projects that at least I've been involved in, there was always incompleteness in the data, and we have to find better ways in order to deal with that. Second big data source is, of course, the data that is coming from the app. So here we have a different order of magnitude. Instead of 6 centers, we will have 600 study participants who will feed data into this platform. And then on the output side, the clinical decision support system, which we aim to have a first version next year, and the app that is already developed in a first version to essentially at this point inform the patients and the participants of the studies about the data that is collected about them, but later on also being essentially the target for providing a prediction flow, prediction score. The data flow is a big issue, and for those of you who have been involved in these kind of projects, I'm sure you had, or I suspect you had similar experiences, pinning down the data flow from the clinical sites to the central repository, to the sites that need to do the analysis, then to the actual output aims, the clinical decision support system and the app for the individual citizens. We put a lot of thought in that, and now it's actually being tested in the real project runtime. So the retrospective data collection is currently ongoing. Again, clinical data, laboratory data, imaging data, all going through this central repository. We will have a central split into data that is available for algorithm development and intermediate kind of validation during development, and a separate isolated set of validation data that we will not essentially unblind before we freeze the algorithms in order to really have an kind of an unbiased view on the performance of these algorithms. We will do that on the retrospective data, and we will also do that on the prospective data. The main difference between retrospective data and prospective data is that for the prospective data, we also have the activity tracking and the app information available, which we are not able to see for the retrospective data. So retrospective data models can be validated on the prospective data regarding the role of clinical data, laboratory data, and imaging data, but for the fitness tracker, we need to also rely on part of the prospective data to actually train and develop the models. The prospective study is currently in the starting phase. So here, the platform is the main, basically, turning point of all information, of the onboarding of the patients, of linking the patients with the Citizen app. So that will all happen during the onboarding visit. To managing the ECRFs, it also plans that this system then manages to some extent or supports the management of the kind of follow-up visits of the individual patients. All of that in order to have one unified system of data storage and data handling that can then deliver the data to the individual sites to actually perform the development. There was a discussion, and I suspect that might be also a discussion later on today, whether we would aim for a federated learning approach or whether we would aim for a kind of a central learning approach, for the reasons that we would like to focus the resources in this project on performing the study and also getting the methods of integrating multimodal data, getting the machine learning methodology developed. We said that we would like to focus on that and see kind of a step towards federated approaches and so on as a follow-up step in this project. So the machine learning development in this project happens on one centralized data set that is collected across all of the clinical partners, both for the retrospective and for the prospective study. To give you a bit of a sense what that looks like. So here are the current systems. On the one hand side, that's the interface for the platform that is used by the essentially trial managers across the 6 sites in order to onboard the individual patients. On the right-hand side, you see current screenshots of the app. So we have a QR-based system in order to link the ID in the database with the ID in the app, and that ensures that the app itself, everything that happens within the app, everything that is communicated within between the app and the central platform is coded, so there are no clear names being sent, being transmitted. That was also important in order to get the ethical approval for performing that quite extensive data collection on the individual study participants. And I'd like to close with giving you a bit of a more in-depth look about our strategy, how to do the machine learning development in the project, what are the main challenges and what are also some initial results, but the real results are now starting to come up as we have access to the full-scale retrospective data set. So we view from a machine learning point of view in a very simplistic way the problem as a prediction problem. So we have clinical data, laboratory data, imaging data of a patient at a certain time point, and we would like to predict if over a certain time period there will be an event, yes or no, a MACE event in our case, yes or no. And we basically train these models to provide a risk score that informs us about the specific risk that this patient will experience an event over this time. I think, well, let's call it model 1, right? So clinical visit data risk score tells us something about the risk of an event. I think exciting aspects of this project, one of them is that we are now aiming at integrating this one time point very deep data with, let's say, less dimensional data, so a couple of activity variables and dietary variables, but these variables being collected over very long time in a very high frequency fashion. And so this, we call that late integration of one-shot data and high frequency continual data to get basically a day-to-day updated risk score for this event happening again within a certain time period over starting from the date where the risk score is calculated. So I think that's a bit of a new paradigm. I think it's a really important contribution or expansion of how we see precision medicine and machine learning supported precision medicine, because we need to learn how to integrate this data and also provide kind of continual and actionable predictions for these scores. This first prediction model right now is based on imaging data, laboratory and clinical data. We are focusing right now for the preliminary results to get good algorithms and stable and robust algorithms running and evaluated that allow us to extract features from imaging data. We're collaborating here, of course, also with partners. So as part of the collaboration regarding the photon counting CT, we are also getting some preview on software that allows us to analyze the imaging data and extract some standard risk markers like coronary artery calcification, plaque, and so on. But on the second part, we are also developing it within the project, and that's mainly happening between Zurich, ICL in London, and Vienna, and medical prediction models that extract potential marker candidates out of imaging data, where the strategy is that we assume that we do not yet know everything that's in the imaging data that could be a predictor, and therefore we first look for anomalies and then look for ways to identify those anomalies in the imaging data or these characteristics in the imaging data that do actually have predictive values. Here, a few glimpses on the current status. This is the heart segmentation model that is being developed by the team of Ben Glocker at ICL. I think, important and innovative thing for this project is that this model not only segments the heart, but it also provides very detailed maps about the certainty of this segmentation. And I think that goes a long way towards providing transparency about the reliability of these segmentations, both for the further development of the algorithms, but also as informing us how strong the basis for inference based on these segmentations is. Second part of work is to not only segment the heart, but also to find a common reference frame across the whole entire population. We don't only want to provide global values, but we would also like to understand if specific locations in the anatomy are different in the way that they predict risks, are anomalies or changes or any other characteristics at specific points in the heart in a different way relevant for the risk than others. And this common, and we call it Atlas reference system, allows us to be quantitative about this comparison and the summary and the inference across the entire population. The segmentation work of the coronary arteries and the heart anatomy is also progressing, I think, quite nicely. And I think we are in a good state to now that the prospective data is coming in, but now that also the large volume retrospective data is coming in to produce initial quantitative profiles. Here, our strategy in this project is that on the one hand side, we would like to, of course, develop new ways of extracting features, but we also see that downstream in the risk modeling part and also in the clinical research part that also requires some initial values in order to get an intuition about what's visible in the data, what relationships are actually captured in this data. So in order to provide those downstream tasks with initial values to work with, so we are now using these segmentations and essentially extract standard features like, for example, radiomics features about the muscle composition, about the tissue texture that we see in the image, about the plaque, about any other biomarkers that we know about, so that we can essentially translate what we see about a patient into a quantitative profile that can serve the research in the clinical part, in the risk prediction part of the project. And at the same time, in parallel, we are building up the capacity to also mine this data for new markers that we did not know about. Here, a very simple proof of concept experiment where we essentially use these features to classify between two very small patient cohorts. But again, this is just a way of saying that we would like to, or that we have filled this pipeline imaging data in, features out, so that the remaining project can work with something. And now we are starting to improve these features. Data streams and machine learning challenges, again, imaging data, laboratory data, clinical variables, and the citizen app variables. I think the challenges for machine learning, and sometimes there is this impression that machine learning is essentially solved, and I think it's not. The main challenges that we need to solve in order to learn from real-world clinical data are models that can cope with the heterogeneity in the data, that can cope with the fact that different sites also have signal in the data that is not coming from the disease, but just from different scanners, different procedures that the patients go through. We have to cope well with incomplete data and the integration of imaging and laboratory data, so multimodal data. We would like to really focus on identifying novel predictors. I think Wiebke already mentioned that there is the potential to improve our current assessment of the risk. And then there is this challenge about the late fusion of features, where we say, well, we have one big feature vector coming from the clinical examination, and we'd like to integrate that with the continually collected data of the fitness tracker. So the next steps are, from a technical point of view, being ready for the prospective study, having the first version of the clinical decision support system up and running, working on the method part, on integrating imaging and laboratory data for the first version of the risk score, and that will be based on the retrospective cohort, and fusing these different imaging modalities. So on the one hand side, technical work that ensures that the infrastructure for the project is up and running. On the other hand side, developing and evolving our vocabulary of markers that we can use for the prediction. I think for all of that, what we also like to emphasize in this project is that this is a very close kind of feedback loop between the clinical researchers and the technical researchers, because a lot of the intuition that we on the technical side get about where to look for features comes from our conversations with the clinicians. And I think the other way around is the same thing, being able to see what's possible also changes a bit where we can look for better ways of predicting this risk. And with that, I'm finished and looking forward for the discussion. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Georg. So we gave you now a more than less brief introduction to iPod, and yeah, the floor is now open for your feedback or questions. Angeliki Kerasioudou, sorry for the pronunciation. Please go ahead. You are muted.
Sorry, yes, I'm just trying to. Cool. Thank you very much. Thank you. That was really interesting and very interesting kind of overview of the whole project. I have two questions, if I may, for Georg, just to kind of and apologies if my questions would be a bit naive. I'm not a computer scientist as a background. I'm on the advisory board for the ethics advisory board, so I'm just trying to kind of understand various aspects. One thing I wanted to ask is about it was very kind of encouraging to see the concept of AI, trustworthy AI, and the two pillars on which you're planning to base that, one validation and the second one about transparency of risk or prediction. And I was wondering, I can see, which is again quite like it's really great to see that this kind of dynamic way of predicting risk for patients. So like, you know, you have the different kind of time points. So it's like one risk prediction in one point in lifetime, which is like I suppose the power and that AI can bring into this clinical space. But how are you going to manage validation? I know that at least from kind of regulatory perspective, as well as kind of my very limited understanding of how validation of models can work, how are you going to integrate this kind of pathway of kind of this dynamic validation of the model to ensure the appropriateness of the tool for the population, as well as the kind of what you kind of mentioned as trustworthiness? No,
thanks a lot. That's a very good question. And I think it's also like we had a lot of discussions about it during the setup of the project and also ongoing right now. So I think one small question was about the regulatory kind of pathway of moving that into a product that you can actually give to patients where they are can trust that it has good quality. I think the regulatory pathway is regarding the model that predicts the risk at a certain time point with a certain accuracy based on the validation results. So even though this prediction happens continually while data is collected and the model is run on this data, basically the old imaging data plus the new activity data or the trajectory of the activity data, the model stays fixed. So for the regulatory approval, there would be one model that would go through approval, and then this model is frozen until the next update, which would be again going through regulatory approval. So there is no retraining or change of the parameters of the model during this continual prediction flow of the patient. So it would be one model. Is that an answer to the question regarding the?
Yes, can I just very quickly follow up? Because you talked about this kind of the challenges about machine learning and all the noise that can come in from the data and the different kind of sites. So I assume that the tool will be used in different sites and it will continue to be used. So wouldn't that, just for my understanding, wouldn't that kind of affect the validity of the foundational model or not?
Yes.
Sorry.
So the validity comes from performing this validation also on multi-center data and being transparent about what the center means for the accuracy of the model. And so since we have data from 6 centers, that will give us the opportunity to, for example, develop the model on 4 centers and then validate the model on 2 other centers in order to not only see what's happening with new patients, but also what's happening really with different centers. And definitely that's always limited because the technology difference are maybe more variable than what we capture in the 6 centers, but still it gives you a sense, it gives you a quantitative value about how well the results replicate across the centers. And we have one specific task in the machine learning in this work package 3 that is only focused on this transfer of models across centers. So we call it kind of domain adaptation, coming from the technical background. How can we evaluate the reliability of the models on new centers, but also how can we improve that? And one methodological way to improve that is to essentially in the representations that the models use to work at disentangling the signal that is coming from the machine, so from the scanner, whether it's an old scanner, new scanner, or a Siemens scanner, or Philips scanner, and from the actual disease. And I think that we have made some progress there in order to improve it. But no matter how good we are, there is always the need to be transparent about that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Now I see 2 faces, one name, Camillo Piazza. So please go ahead with your question.
Thank you. Good day to everyone. I have just a small question. I was wondering, the diet data, I think you want to collect that with the Citizens app, but still, how do you want to do that? So is there a image-based or data food record-based collection of this information?
I can maybe briefly answer from the technical part, but then I think it's mainly Wiebke who can answer from the content. So from the technical part, we briefly tested an image-based, recognition-based system, and it didn't work well. So we will do it via questionnaire. And there the balance will be how detailed the questionnaire be and how compliant people will be willing to type in the detailed information.
Exactly. So ideally, obviously, over the time period of the prospective study of these 24-month participants should give input about the daily dietary habits on a daily basis, which over this long time period from clinical experience is not realistic, right? So we learned from the currently most popular calorie tracking apps, which you are all aware of, and decided in the end for a system which, according to our experience, works pretty well. So patients have to select amongst a portfolio of items and meals, including macronutrient details, the diets ingested on a day, and a minimum compromise we decided is that at least over 3 to 5 days per month, participants randomized into the Citizen app arm have to enter and have to give detailed information about their eating habits, which we feel is realistic. Plus, we have over this time period of 24 months, we see our patients analog to clinical routine on a regular basis on site, which is after 3, 6, 12, 18, and 24 months. And in preparation of the visits on site, patients will be asked and reminded to please fill out, at least over a period of 1 week, ideally 2 weeks, their dietary habits in the Citizen app. So that's how we deal with it in clinical routine, and that's how we feel well, it's realistic to come to a solid compromise that we are dealing with enough enough reliable dietary habits data for the studies work.
Thank you, Wiebke. Another. Yeah, please go ahead. Sorry.
I was wondering, did you also think about a food frequency questionnaire you could do when the patients are at your clinics? Should then include that as an alternative to the proposed process?
The questionnaire, in fact, it includes food frequency, but also obviously meal size and calorie intake and content of meals. So we have the frequency, we have the total amount of calorie of energy input, and also the macro and micronutrient input. Yeah.
Thank you. So then we have next question, Meryl Huisman, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I had actually two questions. One is also about the tracking of the diet. So there has been this really interesting study from Stanford. It's a twin study where they actually found evidence for the vegetarian/vegan diet opposed to omnivorous. There they saw a reduction of like organ fat, right? So is your citizen app going to make a difference between vegan/vegetarian and omnivorous? And did you consider doing an analysis on this?
In fact, no. So it's not objective of the study to compare the impact of different diet regimens on cardiovascular risk prediction, but the recognition of dietary habits has several functions here at different levels. One level obviously is to give this information as input into the machine learning algorithm to see later on if at all and to what extent recommendations for lifestyle optimization have in fact impact on cardiovascular disease progression, first of all. And secondly, when it comes to nutrient consulting, we are here, we recommend our patients according to the DNB obesity in Germany or according to European guidelines for dietary and nutrient consulting for weight management, which means no, we are not focusing and we are not favoring and we are not recommending either low carb, low fat, vegetarian or vegan diets or specific oil diets. That's not what we are doing. We're recommending, or our nutritionists will recommend the caloric restriction diets.
But wouldn't you consider just having that as a variable so that you could do a analysis afterwards? Because it's really a hot topic. Also in my center, we're doing an MRI-based study on cardiovascular risk and also SCAR in cardiac MR, and then diet, the effect of diet on that. So I think it would be a missed opportunity if you wouldn't collect that type of information. That's one. And second, I may have missed it, but are you also going to segment like body composition beyond the heart? You are? Okay, sorry, I may have missed that. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, body composition will be taken at sites where possible, obviously. Indirect calorimetry measurements will be taken as well. It's a good point. Actually, to be honest, we didn't discuss focusing on different diet recommendations add-on for this project. The project in its current character is quite complex enough to be honest. I don't know how many more variables are possible to digest, but something we should definitely discuss internally. Thanks for your suggestion.
Okay.
Thank you. So then we have the next question, Caroline Justich, please.
Yes, hi, I'm from the ESR Patient Advisory Group and also founder of Be Accepted. And from a patient's perspective, have you been thinking about, because we know apps usually function very well if you have a reward system, because from a patient's perspective, if you suffer from obesity, you most likely might not be very honest in your answer filling out a questionnaire, because this is like not being honest in nutrition kind of brings you to that problem in many cases. So maybe something that gives them like a reward system when they do that would be a nice implementation in order to motivate them to participate more honestly and also in a more frequent way. Have you been thinking about models like that or looking into apps that do provide that?
Sorry.
Maybe from a technical point of view, so I think that's a very good point. We thought about how to because we appreciate that motivating the participants to actually type in the data on a regular basis is an issue. So the actual prediction score will only be available at the end of the project. So we thought one thing that the participants get out of the app is that very similar to the health apps, they can look at essentially the statistics of their own basically data and their own trajectory over time. But I think I don't know if someone from Brightfish is here, but I think definitely this how to motivate and make it enjoyable or make it interesting and kind of get some curiosity. That is definitely still an issue, but we are very open for suggestions in terms of what has proven to be a good approach there.
Yeah, because I think this is the key. If it's gonna if you're being able to collect the data on a frequent and honest basis. So because we're also looking in things like that a lot, and these reward systems really usually work very well. And also if people can make it like, which is not going to happen in that case, but like to make it like more public for themselves, you know, to see their progress and their advance might be something. And then also my second question is according to diet, individual diets and suggestions, because people tend not to have any ideas about which diet would be good for them. Is there also intended to be some testings, because, you know, people react in a different way to different kind of diets. And there's a lot of evidence on that. And are you intending to do testings up front, or giving some tutorials on which nutrition would have which effect or anything? Because you know about these things, but a random patient probably won't have any idea about that. So they might have difficulties in starting to approach it in that way. So will there be tutorials or video tutorials or anything like that included in the app?
Thank you for your question. This is actually a very important question. And compared to the question before about the twin study, honestly, we haven't focused too much on dietary or standardization. That's I guess the most important point. Standardization of nutrition and counseling between the centers, right? I guess this is an important take-home message for us to in fact find a consensus which we can easily standardize between the different nutritions at charge at the six sites. But may I ask you one question back regarding your previous remark? You mentioned the reward system or rewarding features included in that. Do you have experience with that?
I've been looking into
which might, you don't have to name a specific company, but experience with what is working extremely well.
I can probably send you a list of things like that to exchange that. Let me just put that down, because I've been also in a similar situation with a similar problem where it depends on the patient putting in their data, and it depends a lot on that. So I've been looking in a couple of these things and research also, and like these reward systems really work very well and are more motivating to get people. You know, if they receive a certain, like, I don't know, a smiley, and then they reach 10 smileys, it's like a competition thing. It's not something big, but something that really encourages you to invest in yourself, to invest in, to check out your nutrition, to raise their awareness. And that could be sometimes underlined with like, you know, I don't know the technical term, but I have that with a few apps that, you know, you get like messages here every day that remind you of like certain things, you know, to stay active and to do kind of these kind of things and take care of your nutrition, or, you know, calculating. And then achieve some price or whatever, you know, some.
Especially for a study purpose that's a fantastic advice. If you could send me or us a link or some literature,
I will send it to IBER to
yes,
distribute it to you.
That would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I have to look out. I was reading some kind of paper on that. I have to find it, but I will. And then I have one last question regarding data storage, because this is always a question that comes on health issues or stored your personal stored health data. Are you storing that? Like, do you do like blockchain storage or anything, or how is this intended to do, especially all these interfaces?
Yeah, so the storage, we don't use blockchain based technology for the storage, but the storage right now is centralized on the platform in this coded way. We also make sure that all the communication between the app and the platform is coded, because the app only knows the code of the patient. Yeah, so that's the current strategy.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and for all this valuable input. Are there any further questions, comments? I can't see any raised hands anymore. So I don't know, Wiebke, Georg, do you have any final remarks? So then I would like to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you very much for the lively discussion and all of your valuable input. It's really, really important. Even better. And the session was recorded, so the recording will be shared on request, or is it publicly available? Maybe you just could comment on this, how people could get the recording of this today's session.
Yeah, it will be shared with all registered attendees, so you'll receive it shortly.
Would be shared anyway. Good. So thank you. Thank you very much again, and yeah, have a nice rest of the day. Thank you. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.